following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. New York Mets baseball, past, present, future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and the host, co-host. One of the co-hosts isn't here. Marty Rose is on assignment, but Robert Cole is with me, and I'd just like to say welcome, Robert.
How you doing, Ralph? Now, I'm sitting here in somewhat chilly Florida today. You know, I mean, it dips below 50, and we all get the coats and the big hats out. But other than that, doing
well,
good.
You know, it's interesting. I did a show with Jack DeGraw. I did the Yankee show with him earlier in the day, and he said for the first time in the 14 years, some odd years, that he lived in Tampa, there was rain for 24 hours straight.
Yes.
Did you experience that too?
Yes, sir. I'm not far from Tampa, in the Tampa Bay area. Started Saturday night and went in through Sunday night.
Whoa. And, you know, a lot of people still deny climate change for one reason or another. But it is very real on your coast and my coast. I don't know about the Midwest, but it is what it is, and we've got something like 18 days before spring training. That's pretty cool.
Oh, yes.
Is off the top of your head, because I'm just trying to react to what's been put on our plates as fans. Is this the best they've looked going into a spring that you can remember in the past 10 years?
Yes, I would have to say that. They changed the lineup somewhat. They added a little more power. The starting rotation, which we thought was the best in baseball last year, was kept intact, and we weren't sure that was going to happen.
Right.
And they've built what was the weakest link, and that's the bullpen. When we first started doing the couple of, after the season shows, and you kept asking us what we thought needed to be done, my reaction was always the bullpen. Well, they've done a tremendous job in the bullpen. And just a couple of days ago, they added probably the next link, the next missing link that they needed, and that was a quality left-handed reliever, and they got that in Justin Wilson.
Now, was that a free agent signing?
Yes.
Okay. Did they pay fair bucks in your estimate?
Yes. It was 2 years. It was... I don't want to guess because I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was very fair on both parts. The Mets did not overpay to get him.
Good. You know, another thing that came to light, they haven't gone to arbitration with anybody. And I always thought that going to arbitration was bad for both sides. You have to come up with things that are bad about your player, and your player loses confidence once he hears management's assessment. And no matter who wins the arbitration, both sides lose. Would you respond to that and tell me I'm on the right track, or I'm full of it?
Oh, no, absolutely you're on the right track. And don't forget, we have as general manager a man that sat in on that other side of the table. Okay, the new general manager, Brodie Van Wegenen,
right,
represented many a player in an arbitration hearing, and he knows firsthand what that can do to both sides. And they have made a very, very strong effort to get everybody signed fairly. They gave Jacob deGrom probably the highest amount pre-arbitration that anybody's ever gotten, so they didn't have to go to arbitration with him. I believe they signed all their other arbitration-eligible players. Very, very important. Very important. you just don't want that lingering. The players say, well, it's over and I'm going to go out and play, but there's a bad taste in their mouths.
Yeah. You know how this time of year the baseball magazines come out with the roto leagues and what have you, and the rankings.
Right.
I just picked one up, one of the early ones. I always wait for a few weeks until the better ones come out. Linden is my favorite, but that's neither here nor there. And but I was glancing. I saw a draft cheat sheet, and
it's easy for you to say.
It is. I'll tell you. I have a voice for radio, but they didn't hire me because I'm Jewish. In any event, listed as the number one closer. I'm not going to give you a dollar figure what they put on him for the draft, but because it escapes me, was the Mets closer, and the sixth leading catcher was the Mets catcher, Wilson Ramos. And now, that doesn't take into consideration defense, and I've asked you that before. You saw him close up personal in Tampa, or St. Pete, rather. Peter Goldenbach is going to smack me if I call him the wrong name. But would you say he's good defensively?
Yes. The Rays pitchers liked pitching to him. He's one of the big things now is framing. He's a good framer of the baseball. He handled some very difficult pitchers with the Rays. They had a bunch of young, very hard-throwing pitchers. They all felt confident throwing to him, very happy with his defense. He has an above-average arm, an above-average, throwing out base stealers, and an overall good, solid catcher. The only question about him has been he's had some injuries. He had an injury this past year with the Rays. He had a pulled hamstring. He's a very powerful, muscular guy, and you just hope that he's able to keep it together all year long.
Yeah, heavy-legged catchers oftentimes have problems, and boy, it would be a pity if injuries strike for the third year in a row. And I know there's no predicting them, and I would say, what are you going to do when last year, the year before last, at the end of the year, they fired their training and their medical staff, and they started again, and not only did injuries not decrease, they increased last year.
Yes. Yep.
So it's a baseball problem,
Oh, absolutely.
Pitchers, how to handle them, what to do, this, that, and the other thing. It's not just the Mets, I understand that, but I'm waiting for a nice, healthy year. That would be nice.
Well, why don't we try doing it this year?
All right. Then I'm going to put in for it. I was thinking about it, and I just got to push a few buttons to order it. I'm going to go eBay on this one.
Okay.
All right. So, and the reason why is the free delivery. I mean, I got to say, I'll pay $30 extra for free delivery.
There you go.
It's the American way. What do you see? What worries you? Are they overly dependent on getting that boost from Cespedes when the time comes?
No, I believe that they sort of shelved the Cespedes coming back at any time idea. They went out and they got Jed Lowry, Okay, they brought in Wilson Ramos. Of course, they got Cano. That lengthens the lineup. Frazier doesn't have to bat third, fourth, or even fifth. He can bat a little further down in the lineup. I think their mindset is to go without Cespedes. If he does come sometime during the season, it would be almost like when they made that trade at the trading deadline a couple of years ago, when he injected them with, what they needed to drive to the pennant and get into the World Series. So I think that's a good.
I hope Conforto continues to improve and doesn't have another setback. That's a biggie in my head.
Yeah. Well, I think they set the lineup a little bit different this year. They have a little bit more right-handed pop, which will offset the lefties. I mean, they saw a whole lot of left-handed pitching last year, and they were a left-handed dominant lineup. When Bruce was in there, Nimmo, Conforto, all these guys, lefty swinging, and you throw lefty starters at them, 3-4 times a week, and it was tough. So
it's funny. When I play dice baseball and choose up teams and draft teams or whatever, I have the good sense to keep a balance of maybe have a platoon at first base, but, lefty, righty. So when it comes to it, I won't be stuck like the Brooklyn Dodgers was stuck back in the day where Duke Snider was seeing right-handed pitchers and getting rich, but or
right.
left-handed pitchers all the time, or whatever. But I always wonder why a team doesn't see that. This is a GM that is seeing you got to keep a balanced lineup to win. And I like the idea of McNeil becoming a super sub in the Zorbost tradition.
Right.
And especially with the rosters being the way they are, you carry 14 pitchers, 25-man roster, you're only going to have 2 guys coming off the bench, 3 at most. You got to be versatile. And I love the way they've made what I call lemonade out of lemons. When they first got Cano, I thought, wow, that is going to weaken them defensively at second. Marty tells us both that Cano, in fact, is a superior defensive second baseman, and that putting him over at third takes a lot of pressure off Alonso. You could always put Frazier at first. It looks good. This guy seems to have an idea. You needed a left-handed bullpen guy to complete the puzzle going into spring, and he goes out and gets it.
Yep.
That's good.
Yes. Oh, no, he's, I had deep reservations. I was hoping that Chaim Bloom was going to get the job. You may have also, we were a little leery of, Van Wagenen and what he was going to do, and then the first thing he does is he makes a trade to bring one of his former clients to the team, and, that kind of ruffled my feathers a little bit. But he's made good moves. I think right now, you talked about Alonso. I do not believe Alonso is going to make the team out of spring training for a number of reasons. One, to keep the pressure off of him. Another one, to not start that, clock that we keep talking about. And you bring him up a little bit into the season, and he doesn't have as much pressure on him. Frazier can play first base. I think Lowry's going to play third base to start the season. And, it's a good lineup. And then you have not only McNeil as a super sub, but the other player they picked up, J.D. Davis. Now, J.D. Davis is highly rated, plays first, plays third, can even play a little middle infield, and also plays the outfield. So you have 2 guys in J.D. Davis and Jeff McNeil who really add, versatility to the team, which is something they hadn't really had last couple of years. And then there's spare outfield.
Who are we looking at? Frazier at first?
Yeah, right now the projected lineup is Frazier at first, Cano at second, Rosario at short, Lowry at third, Nimmo in right, Lagares in center, Conforto in left, and Ramos catching.
And those two guys coming off the bench.
Those two guys coming off the bench along with
and
Darno.
A closer and a left-handed reliever and re-signing from the A's. How quickly we forget. Yeah. I think putting him in a role where there's less pressure is going to help. Unless I'm missing the boat somewhere, it's just a matter of staying healthy. And if they turned around and surprised us both and signed Bryce Harper, I would be disappointed if they didn't go to the World Series. But without that, and Marty would say you're dreaming, and that's probably true. But without that, I think they're going to be contenders. And in today's day and age, that's all you can ask for.
Oh, absolutely. Now, of course, Marty, myself, and several others are a little dismayed when Brodie Van Wegenen made the statement a week or so ago. Now they all have to come after us.
I wouldn't go quite that far. If he signed Bryce Harper and he said that, okay, but that's a little forced bravado.
Yes.
The way I see it, but that kind of stuff works in athletics. It's you got to motivate a team. You got to motivate everybody in the organization to think that way, even if you don't believe it. And so I'll go with that. That if nothing more, it makes one smile.
Right. And then, we haven't talked yet tonight about the starting rotation. DeGrom.
All intact and all seemingly healthy.
Yeah. And, I was looking at this the other day, and I'm saying to myself, how can they go on any lengthy losing streak like they did last year when, you have DeGrom, Syndergaard, Wheeler, Matz, and Vargas? I mean, somewhere along the line, if they lose one or two games, then the next guy steps up. So it's hard to imagine a long, lengthy losing streak again.
With that starting pitcher and the arguably among the five best closers, if not the best, I feel very, very confident.
Yeah, look how many times poor DeGrom took leads into the late innings, and there was nobody to hold it.
Mm-hmm. That kind of ERA, that kind of whip, that kind of strikeouts to walk ratio, and he wins but 10, 11 games.
Yep.
But nice to see baseball recognizing him and recognizing the dominating year. And we come from a team that has always been, we're fans of a team that has always been pitching rich when they did well. And
yes.
We're talking Seavers, the Kuzmins, the Goodens, the Matlacks, the Bob Apodakas.
Right.
And a lot of great pitching over the years. He had a year that rivaled any one of those guys that I mentioned.
Oh, the only one you could even compare it to is, that one Seaver year, the one Gooden year.
Yeah, right. Gooden had 1 year, too, that was incredible.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And
it brings me back in my thought process, and I'll ask you this. If you would have thought when it started going good with Gooden and Strawberry, and you mix in the the Carters and the Dykstras and the Mookies and the Mitchells and stuff, that they have broken it up where they only got one championship out of that 86 team. It's really amongst the saddest part of Met history, right there.
Oh, absolutely. But then you go back and you think of, they win the World Series, they have the victory parade. Gooden and Strawberry miss it, and the reason why they missed it was because they were out the night before, doing it up with the coke. Well, we didn't realize it at the time. They made some sort of an excuse, but that was the start, the start of the end.
And ironically, there's a fellow that wrote a book on that, has just become my Facebook friend. I invited him on, and he said thank you. So we're going to arrange it. Jeff Pearlman, in the very near future, is going to.
Good.
If I'm not mistaken, he wrote the book. I better be not mistaken. The Good Guys Lost, or something to that effect.
The Bad Guys Won.
The Bad Guys,
I believe, is the name of it.
Okay. Yes, The Bad Guys Won, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
The Fans Lost.
Very good book, by the way.
Yes, and so that's a future guest on the Met Show for us.
Good.
And what is it, 17, 18 days to go to spring training?
Yes, and then I'll be able to stick my head out my window here, and just about here the bat's cracking and the gloves popping.
That's how close you are, huh?
Yep.
Nice.
So.
And you have an affinity with the Yankees a little bit too?
A love-hate relationship, yes.
Right. Like all of the National League fans that endured their team, you with the Dodgers, me with the Giants,
right?
Endured their team leaving at age 11.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that sucked, big time.
And then until the Mets
both
came
of us,
along in '62,
did though have the Yankees to develop that love-hate relationship. I mean, you worshiped the players, you hated the team for their success. They were like rooting for U.S. Steel. But looking back, I can't think of any of these guys that don't bring back incredible memories of seeing these guys play and their excellence. It was a privilege to grow up in New York, where it was almost a birthright to have the World Series in your backyard.
Well, for those 4 years that we didn't have National League Baseball, my father, although he was a big Brooklyn Dodger fan and really gave up on baseball, took me to Yankee Stadium, 50 or 60 times in those 4 years, nurturing my love of baseball. So I had 7 teams that I rooted for, everybody but the Yankees in the American League. And, he took me to Yankee Stadium many times. My favorite ball player next to Gil Hodges was Roger Maris. When Roger first came up with Cleveland, I started following him when he first came up with Cleveland. Then he got traded to Kansas City, and then of course to the Yankees. But he was my second.
Well, let me tell you a funny story about that. When he got traded from Cleveland to Kansas City, there were 2 or 3 players sitting on the bench, and they found out about it, and they said, "We just got Roger Maris." And it was 2 years, I think, he played at Kansas City before that trade was consummated, but they knew it was an automatic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, anybody who went to Kansas City, it was like, the Yankees, bringing them, to the AAA team. And that's basically what the Athletics were to the Yankees, for those few years.
Do you remember the day, I think it was 1960, when the Yankees acquired Bud Daly from Kansas City? And Bud Daly had been amongst the 4 or 5 best left-handed pitchers in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do really well with the Yankees, ironically, but I remember going to the schoolyard and talking to some guys and hearing that and thinking, this is wrong. The balance of power is just messed up somehow.
Yep. Well, you know that story, right? I'm not sure if I said it on air, but back in those days, as we remember, if you signed a bonus player for $10,000 or more, he had to spend 2 years on the major league team, okay, or you lost him. And
right.
The Yankees in the late 50s had two players, one by the name of Frank Lee and the other by the name of Tommy
Lee was
Carroll.
from Notre Dame, if I'm not mistaken.
Tommy Carroll was from Notre Dame, yes.
Oh, Tommy Carroll, not Lee was.
Right.
They weren't
Tommy
both.
Carroll was the Notre Dame player.
And Casey
so
hated them both.
Yep, they had them both. Okay, they wanted to sign Clete Boyer, but if they signed Clete Boyer, they would have had to also keep him on the bench. So what they did was they had the Athletics sign Clete Boyer. Clete Boyer spent 2 years on the Kansas City Athletics, barely played. Okay, as soon as his 2 years was up, they traded him to the Yankees. The Yankees sent him to the minors for a couple of years and brought him up. And that's how the Yankees worked in those days.
And they had a great partner in that, in Arnold, who owned the Kansas City A's, and who had come from Philadelphia. And he had been a previous part owner of the Yankees. I think he owned part of Yankee Stadium at one time.
Correct. Yes, he did.
And they kept making these sweetheart deals, and
and I believe, if I'm correct in this, and I think I am, the Yankees put in a new scoreboard in Yankee Stadium, and the old scoreboard went to Kansas City.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is something indicative of what we're talking about.
And then, of course, when Charlie Finley bought the A's, the first thing he did was stop dealing with the Yankees completely.
And he hired Eddie Lopat, if I'm not mistaken, as a general manager, or Frank Gordon, Trader Gordon, Joe Gordon, or somebody who instantly disobeyed Finley and made a trade, and ended up getting fired for it. I'm finding out a lot about the Finley years from Nancy Finley, who's a regular on the A Show on this network, and she is the niece of Charlie and the daughter of Carl Finley, who really, in essence, was the brains behind a lot of it. Finley signed the players, and he had the promotions, but her dad, Carl, was the one that kept it together on a minimum budget and ran the A's while Charlie was in Chicago. Anyway, they ended with Finley. You're right, indeed. They ended that Big Brother type thing, where the Yankees are just going to get the better of it. And when you think of the Yankees getting Reggie, he came from Baltimore. He had been traded by the A's first for Don Baylor, and then he spent a year with Baltimore, and then he came with the A's. So it didn't break that tradition right there.
Right. And then, there's a relationship with Walter O'Malley and Charlie Finley. They hated each other. And if you remember when Finley was selling all his players all over the place. Reggie and Catfish and, all these guys were being traded.
Right.
Bowie Kuhn was the commissioner at the time, and Walter O'Malley called him up and said, "You got to put a stop to this. You can't allow this." And
is that what got Kuhn involved? Was Walter? I didn't realize there was an animosity between those two.
Yep, tremendous amount of animosity. They hated each other even more after that. But O'Malley said, "You can't allow this to happen," and a lot of those, trades and things were voided at that time.
Well, I know one trade that was voided, and I can have a vivid memory of watching a rare televised baseball game in those days. It was a Friday night game, and it was the Red Sox playing somebody, but suited up were Raleigh Fingers and Joe Rudy.
Right.
And Kuhn called that off. They never played a game with the Red Sox, but I remember them wearing Red Sox uniforms in a pregame. They didn't get in the game, but they were actually on the roster, and that was one of the trades that Kuhn called off.
Yes.
So, what did Finley call Kuhn? The village idiot.
Yes, he did.
So they had a terrible relationship based on those things. Finley was mom and pop, and he saw the writing on the wall with free agency. He wasn't going to be able to keep up. And especially in the locale, the A's were always the stepchild in the Bay Area. Giants came here first, Willie and McCovey and Cepeda and all those guys. Early on success, there was no way the A's were going to ever catch up, and they haven't till this day. But ironically, the A's are close to building a ballpark. We've talked about this and the analogy between St. Pete and whether or not you guys are going to get a ballpark. It's the same sort of political crap. Yeah. Do you have any update as to what the situation is in Tampa?
Well, the Ybor City plan has gone by the wayside. It now appears that the best case scenario is actually rebuilding the ballpark on the current site of Tropicana Field.
Whoa.
They would get some tax breaks, some tax benefits, and that would make the most sense right now. Now they're still looking around. I mean, they still have some time, before this lease runs out. But if St. Pete makes a few concessions, I think that very well may be what happens, is that they'll stay in St. Pete. They'll build a newer ballpark, a smaller ballpark. They're thinking, somewhere in the range of like 25,000 seats.
Will it be
go along with that? They're making a lot of seats no longer available in Tropicana Field. They're going to close off the upper deck in Tropicana.
Exactly what they did what they've done in Oakland. Boy, I'll tell you, and Oakland's looking for a small, intimate ballpark as well. Will it be domed in Tampa?
Yes, almost has to be. When you get these thunder showers and late day showers, it'd be very, very difficult to have an open air ballpark. Really
okay.
would.
Peter Golenbach says it isn't all that bad. What do you think of the ballpark, having seen a number of them all over the place?
It's not. Maybe I've just gotten used to it. It's the home ballpark, but It's really not a bad ballpark. The current owners have put a lot of money into it, trying to make it more fan-friendly. You can literally walk around the entire ballpark. It's 360 degrees now. They opened up, some of the walkways and stuff. And it's quite nice, quite fan-friendly. Not bad at all. It probably could have been built a little bit different. It was built in the rush because they were expecting, to get a team before they actually got a team. I think we've talked about, the story about the Giants signing an agreement to move to Tampa.
Oh, yeah, and Bill White said,
Right. And in fact, I still have somewhere in my files here my receipt. They were taking deposits for seats, and I have my receipt for $50 deposit to see the Giants.
Wow. Did they have a cap logo and everything?
I don't believe they had the cap logo yet, but they started, doing some reserving of seats. I mean, the deal was done. It was a done deal. Bill White stepped in, and Peter O'Malley stepped in. Okay, Bill White, for racial reasons, because he had to, be separate from the Cardinal players, when they were training here in St. Pete. Peter O'Malley didn't want to see the Giants leave because he wanted to retain that
rivalry.
That rivalry that they had, which is one of the reasons why his father convinced the Giants to move to San Francisco in the first place. Well,
actually, they were gone, the Giants. They were all but gone.
They were going to go to Minneapolis. Yes.
And he did convince them.
Well, actually, they did not get permission. Before the 56 season, Horace Stoneham asked for permission at the winter meetings to move to Minneapolis. Okay. O'Malley knew what he was going to be doing. He asked the Phillies to say no. In those days, for a team in the National League to move, you had to have a 100% agreement. In the American League, it was different. You just needed 6 out of 8 teams. In the National League, you needed all 8 teams to approve a move. Okay. The Phillies spoke up and said, no, we were against it. Okay, so they were not going to be able to move to Minneapolis at least that season. And then O'Malley went to work on Stoneham to get him out to San Francisco. But I can still remember the day that Peter O'Malley said, okay, we cannot do this to the good fans of San Francisco and let the ball team leave. Okay, gee, what did your father do back in 57, Peter? But that's another story for another day.
Yes, absolutely. Still one of the 3 most hated men in the history of the world, and could be 4 now, but we'll talk about that some other time too.
And believe it or not, I would agree with you. Okay, we won't go into that, but I
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad there have been. He's not a Republican as we know it. So it's not all that much of a stretch to believe that this guy's a crazy man, even for Republicans.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
And I appreciate that, too. But there is a substantial difference in the ideology of a Democrat and a Republican. But at a real basic level, you can stop the wheel, change the labels, and both parties are exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
Trump notwithstanding.
Well, I've always said, Ralph, just to go political for a second, okay, the far left and the far right are the same person, just in a different direction. And a true Republican and a true Democrat, okay, now not conservative, not liberal, but a true Democrat and a true Republican are actually very close to being the same person.
That's true in the Keating era back in the day, but we've changed the center the center is today is, say, a Clinton, for instance, is a Republican. So when you say a true Democrat with democratic ideology, a guy like Vernon, even though he calls himself a socialist, shot himself in the country in the foot with that, because people, the great unwashed masses, don't know the difference between socialism and communism. And they don't realize that the library is socialism, the police station is socialism, the education system is socialism, the garbage pickup is socialism, that sort of thing. And
well, the thing is, the Soviet Union always called itself the Soviet Socialist Republic. Okay, and that moniker has stuck. So people relate that they're both the same, and they're not.
That's very good. I hadn't thought of it in that way. That puts it in people's heads. Yep.
United Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR. And to people, who don't know any better, and a lot of them don't want to know any better, the two are the same. So, I mean, anytime you talk about, communism, socialism, people think it's the same thing, and it's not.
Absolutely. And but then again, half the voters aren't coming out anyway, one way or the other. That's what the real scary part is, that we have people, and everybody I know has a relative or friends of relatives or this, that, or the other thing that have died for the right to vote.
Yes.
And yet barely over 50% of the eligible voters vote in an election. So
the one thing my father made me promise, before he left, was that I would always vote. He says, I don't care which way you voted, you have to promise me that you'll vote. I don't care if you go there and you write in Porky Pig, but you have to go and vote, because a lot of people lost their lives to give you that right. So, I mean, that's something I've never forgotten. Okay.
Hey, so if you're listening out there, whether or not you love the Mets, hate the Mets, vote, for crying out loud. All right,
absolutely.
Robert. Good show, my friend. We'll be back at you, everybody, really soon. The show is New York Met Baseball. Robert here, Marty on assignment. And it's me, Ralph Tyko, with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Thank you for listening. It's fun for me. And Robert, 18 more days, spring training.
Yes, sir. I'm going to get my glove out and start oiling it.
Beautiful. See you soon, my friend.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Over and out. The proceeding was a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production. Thank you for listening.